tribal members of First Nations in the political process and the activities of the Democratic Party at the local, state, and national level. The caucus shall advocate for public policies which promote the needs of tribal communities and the state at large. So, in summary, how I think of it is we are there to help represent and advocate for the wants and needs and priorities of Native communities here in Texas at the party level, so that we have some type of representation and seat at the table, and have a bigger say in who our candidates are and what policies they pass. So, how we do that, some of the things that we do, we have monthly leadership meetings with guest speakers, usually on different topics. We had Joey out one time with UNIW, Retreat, great, it's always something different. And those meetings are often, they help provide a space to build community and just talk about our different ideas, brainstorm, think about things we want to see, how to make that happen. And it also helps create opportunities to learn and grow as advocates, community members, and leaders. We also, like I was saying earlier, work with Texas Democratic Party leadership to advance the caucus priorities within the party. So this year is really exciting because the convention is June. Long story short, but we're going to hopefully get a real change passed and approved so that we have representation on the executive committee within the party, which gives us again, a seat at the table, along with all the other caucuses, to be official, and really be able to hopefully do more and advocate for more at that level. And then outside of the party itself, we advocate for legislation at the state and federal level, so whether it's the Texas legislature or Congress up in DC. I actually have some pictures. This is just last month, I believe. A group of us, including some students from UTA and NASA, and other people from across Texas, were able to go to Washington, D.C. and advocate for our legislators to pass the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian boarding schools bill. And this was introduced a few years ago. I've been working to pass it, but it would really do a lot to investigate and address the ongoing issues of the boarding school era. And so this is some of us meeting with Senator Cornyn's staffer. There were so many of us that they had to put us out in the hallway. We couldn't fit in the office, but it was a really cool experience. And yeah, for less than a month. Yeah, I think this kid is about 12 years old, our youngest one was 5, so it's really cool to be able to start really young and kind of show them the ropes. Okay, so that's a little bit about us. When it comes to voting itself, you guys are probably familiar with the idea that voting is important. It's like something a lot of us want to understand, but I want to dig a little bit deeper as to why, especially for our communities. So voting is really our way to have that representation, so we can hold our elected officials accountable. If we don't tell them what we want, if we don't make that known, they're not going to pass policies that reflect our interests or our needs. If we're just quiet and we don't do anything. So our vote really is our voice, and one of the ways that we can push for that representation. I'll get to it in a second. This is also the 100th anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act passed in 1924, which granted Native Americans the right to vote. But does anyone know why I put an asterisk there, or quotation marks? It wasn't until about 40 years later, with the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, that all Native Americans really did have the right to vote. Because even though this law was passed, as is typical in our history, they didn't really follow through on it. Many states still were able to legislate on their own who was and was not eligible to register or to vote. And so, slowly over time, those state laws were chipped away, repealed. But even then, we still face things like poll taxes, literacy tests, intimidation. So even though technically on the books we've had this right for 100 years, it's been a long process, and there's still lots of issues that we face when it comes to actually having this full right. There are still intentional efforts to suppress Native American votes, along with basically any other minority groups we can think of, Black, Hispanic, Asian, lower income folks. But a lot of these things, well, a lot of these voter suppression tactics target a lot of people. They hit a lot of people, but there's some things that especially affect Native American communities. When it comes to things like ID requirements, in Texas, you can't vote with a tribal ID, even though it is a government-issued photo ID. They will not let you use that to vote. Places like Texas and across the country have really limited voting by mail. So if you're in a rural area, if you live on a reservation, or if you have an address that's non-traditional, not necessarily accepted by USPS, it's a lot harder to vote by mail, to have it reach your house and return and all of that, and have your vote actually cast. There's also other things too, like limiting the amount of time for early voting, whenever they just purge the voter rolls because they want to. If they're not really correct, redistricting, gerrymandering, lots of ways that they're trying to generally suppress the vote. So with all of that, it's really important that we do take advantage of the power that we have and make it useful. So another interesting bit of information is that in 2020, only 66% of eligible Native Americans were registered to vote, leaving over 1 million eligible Native Americans unregistered. And so, probably a lot more than this were not, even if they were registered, they probably weren't voting. And we do have the lowest turnout rates compared to other ethnic and racial groups in the US. So we kind of fixed that. Part of it is due to this intentional, voter suppression, but a lot of it has to do with, I think, encouraging our community members, our family members. And I've been in the business of trying to convince people to vote for years. And I always understand why people may not want to disillusioned with the system. If, for years and years you see the government, not working in your favor, I understand why you might think, why build it? But the fact of the matter is that, we have this right, our ancestors fought so hard, and that wasn't enough. Right? We owe it to them, we owe it to ourselves, our communities, to take advantage of that right and harness our power. Okay, so these are just, I won't read all of this, but these are 2 examples of times when Native voters actually took the scales and determined elections. So for example, in 2002, that was Senator's re-election, he won by 500 votes when the final votes were counted on the primary nomination. Right? If you look here, 2012, Senator Heidi Heitkamp won by a 1% margin that she attributed to the Native vote. And down here, Senator Tester won by the slim margin of 3,562 votes, which really is not that many in the Senate race. There are more than 50,000 voting age Americans in Montana, more than 17,000 votes coming from Indian reservations. So, as you can see, we have a lot of power, and when we take advantage of this 1 million plus number, we can really change things. We can tip the scales. Get everyone mobilized. Okay, who is this? Anybody else? So switching gears into the office, Green's office, I believe. So this is Deb Holland, who she's the woman of Pueblo, and she's the Secretary of the Interior. She was appointed by President Biden in 2021. She became the first Native American to serve as a cabinet secretary. And so technically this is an appointed office, not elected, but I think this is a really beautiful and great, an inspiring example of what's possible. Right? I want to just be the second cabinet secretary. No, but yeah, she's doing a lot of really amazing work. She spearheaded the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, which that led to the investigative report that was published, that led to the bill that we've been pushing for. So a lot of really amazing work that can happen when we have people who represent us in office and who understand our struggles and our needs and what our communities face. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about why run for office. This is something that Victoria said that some members have been interested in. But again, it all goes back to representation, right? Anyone have any guesses as to how many Native Americans are currently serving in the U.S. Congress out of 535 seats? About 5. right? Which I think that when I did the math, it comes out to like 0.5%, which is low. What about the Texas legislature out of 101 seats? Nothing. Yeah. Which is really sad. So I did a screen grab from a website. 3% is the percentage of the Texas population that identifies as Native American or Indigenous. And in Texas, there are over 27,000 elected officials. 0 of them identify as Native American, American Indian, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian, meaning that you would need 829 more to get parity to make it representative of the population. So we got a lot of room to make up in terms of, having the same representation that we. So those are some examples of federal and statewide seats, but I'm going to talk more about local races. These being some of those reasons. So local government often has a much bigger impact on us in our daily lives than state and federal offices and those policies. I like to think of it as like the closer home it gets, the more local it is, the more impact you tend to feel. Another reason is that it's a good opportunity to be a leader and a change maker in your own community. When you can say you're going to work for your neighbors or the people maybe in just the next town over, and as big as it gets, you get to stay there in your community and really represent those people in that aspect. Another reason is that local offices, especially school boards, are becoming targets for political extremists pushing their agenda. And right now, I'm with the Democratic Party. A lot of times, as we swing in nonpartisan spaces, I can talk about party stuff, but it's almost heavy for me. And it really, to me, isn't about Republican or Democrat necessarily. Like, I respect all people, regardless of your political beliefs. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of these agendas are being pushed by those on the other side of the aisle. And again, regardless of where you stand, it's about your morals and your values at the end of the day. And I think that's what's best for our kids. Local races are also way less resource intensive than larger races, so in terms of just time and money, it's a lot more manageable, a lot more achievable for everyday people. And if you do, have your eye on your office, this is a great way to get your foot in the door, to learn a little bit, and then, in the future, prove yourself to donors and say, hey, I won this smaller race, I can, successfully win this other race, please fund me. Okay, there's also lots of different types of elected offices. I'm just going to throw all of them up here. So these are ones that you may be more familiar with. So state senator, state representative, state board of education, city council, mayor, Supreme Court, right? But there's also all of these too. So, if you have a JD, you could run for any type of judge, justice, or attorney position, your county clerk, your tax assessor, collector. These two often run elections. So the county will either have an election administrator or it'll be split between these two offices. So they have a lot of power when it comes to elections. There's library districts, river authority boards, community college districts, municipal utility districts, groundwater conservation districts, and all of these are elected positions. And the requirements, which I'll get into in just a second, the bar for these positions is pretty low. Like it's, I think, a lot easier than a lot of people may imagine. So the qualifications and requirements can often vary for local office, but generally they require that you be a U.S. citizen, that you be a Texas resident for at least 1 year, that you've lived in your own district for the place that you're running for anywhere between 6 to 12 months at least, and that you are at least 18 to 21 years old. These requirements may vary, so it's always good to just reach out to the local subdivision that you're interested in running for. But the point is that basically, if you're passionate and driven and you want to be that change in your community, you are probably eligible. Things that are not required: fancy degree, decades of political experience, or really any political experience, or millions of dollars. So I think, and we've been seeing this a lot since 2016 and 2020, I believe, but we really need more everyday people who are experts in maybe their profession or just their communities in general, to really take those seats. My personal opinion, probably shared by others in this room, that there's too many old, wealthy white men in those positions of power, and we need to take those back. And again, make sure we have people who are going to really advocate for what we want and need. Yeah. The point of this, again, is that anyone can do it. Anyone, they can do it. How? So this is where it gets complex, but I'll try to keep it kind of bird's eye view. The one thing that you have to do regardless is file for office. Basically just, go in and submit your application within whether it's council or a school board district, whichever political subdivision. Sometimes you'll have to pay a filing fee, and or you can turn in a petition with signatures of people showing their support for you, which can sometimes be a substitute for that. And then there will always be a filing deadline, and that kind of window of time and deadline can vary. But it's usually maybe a few months before the election, or maybe a little bit longer, but usually not more than a year. So the whole time frame, the on-ramp can be pretty short compared to, say, like a presidential race, which those campaigns are like 2 years. And then after that, you launch your campaign. And this is where it's kind of up to you and make it a little more complicated, but these 5 elements are kind of the basics and different things you're going to have to do. These are kind of in no particular order, but I did put fundraise first because the sad part is that you can't run a campaign without money. And it doesn't have to take a lot. Again, the smaller the race, the less expensive it's going to be. Maybe in thousands, like low tens of thousands, if you're being really nice with your money. But you want to make sure that you can fundraise. Organize and plan, so make sure you get a campaign manager, have staff, volunteers, figure out how you're going to achieve your goals throughout the whole campaign. You're going to want to look at data, figure out how many votes does it take to win, for that kind of stuff. You can look at previous races, see who turned out, what they voted for, where they were, kind of figure out who is in your district, what they're, are voting for, figure out what it's going to take for you to get to that one number to win the election. Then you've got field, which is where my personal experience is. So these are the people organizing, canvassing, knocking doors, calling people, just trying to gain support, right? Talking to voters directly, again, encouraging them to support the candidate and see maybe what issues they have, what interests they have, and how they can help support those. And then you have communications, which can be kind of fun, and I think is where campaigns can get really personal. This is where you develop your message and your personal story and really communicate to your potential voters why you are the best candidate to solve those issues in your community, what your personal values and experience are, and why that gives you a benefit or why that's an asset in this race. Any questions, comments so far? We're getting close to the end. So that seems like a lot, maybe, all those different things. And if I've thought about running for office before, and I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. I don't know a lot about most of these things. But the good thing is that there are so many resources out there, so many organizations that are dedicated to recruiting candidates, training them, endorsing them, and that endorsement gives them a lot of additional support, which can sometimes be monetary, and basically guide you through all these different steps that they listed. These bullet points actually came from a training I did one time with Annie's List, which is a progressive female-focused organization, and it ended up being, it was a Zoom thing, and no one else showed up with me, so it was me one-on-one with the trainer, and it was a really cool, personalized almost session. It took a lot of good notes, and so it's things like that that can help you out. Go away, run for something is another really good organization, which focuses on young progressive candidates. She should run, and female-focused. The Texas Democratic Party, as well as, this isn't exactly a national party, but an organization called National Democratic Training Committee has all different types of trainings and resources. And those organizations really, especially like the departments of your county or your state, are really there to support you and give you any type of resources or to kind of point you in the right direction with any questions you may have. There's also the movement school, which is more like organizing focused, especially if you're thinking about running for office, but I want to get involved in my community, I want to get my neighbors out. Movement school is really good for something like that, a lot more grassroots and maybe issue-based as opposed to campaign-based. And then we are working with the state party, the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, to coordinate candidate training. So we're still working on setting that up, but I have links and a QR code and all kinds of stuff. If you're interested in that, we'd like to share that. We can get that set up and have a personalized training for those in the Indigenous and New York community. So again, other important rules if running for office isn't your bag, but you want to make an impact. You can always think about working for an elected official, and all the different meetings I've had with like the Senator Cornyn's of the world, or Representative Sards. You're always meeting with their staffer, and they're the ones who are really the issue experts. The elected official has so many different things to worry about, but the staffers are the ones really making all those moves. So you can be that person. You can become a precinct chair, which is someone who is responsible for organizing and mobilizing people in your neighborhood and your community, which works directly with your county party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, that's your choice. But those are, the precinct chair is it's within your county party, and those are publicly elected positions. You can volunteer on local campaigns. Basically, any skill or interest you have, there's space for that on a campaign. Whether, a lot of times they need people to go and knock doors or phone bank. Those are not necessarily my favorite because I don't love talking to strangers like that. But we can text bank, we can help with events, we can help with data management, or be a photographer. Anything that you like to do, there's room for that. And local candidates always love in-kind donations and people volunteering your time. Or you can join local organizations working on issues that you care about, which if you're here, it's going to be done that. A couple last things. Another thing I always love to encourage people to do is call your representatives. It is literally their job to listen to you. They kind of have to. So whether it's local, if it's your city council person, if it's your state House representative or your senator, like call Ted Cruz and tell them what you think. I like to do that all the time. Or you can email, or whatever it is, like any issue that you care about, you have that inroad. They are obligated to listen to their constituents, and that needs to hear us out. And here's one bill that it only recently came onto my radar, but it's the Native American Voting Rights Act. So if you think about what I was saying earlier about the history of voting rights and the ways that people are still trying to get away with it, this bill, which is at the federal level, would really help to stop all that stuff from happening. I have it hanging up on my table over there. There's also links, which I'm happy to share the slide with you later. But it was introduced a few years ago, and among other things, it would allow tribes to determine an assortment of items pertaining to voting, including the number of locations, voter registration sites, polling places, and drop boxes on their reservations. It would also require states to accept tribal ID as voter identification. And that's actually something that was a bill that was introduced, kind of tangent. The tribal ID issue was a bill that was introduced last session in the Texas legislature, and as many of the bills do, it died. It didn't move anywhere. And so that's something I would really love to help push forward in the next session, which is next year. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez. He just ran for Senate and did not win that race, but he joined one of our general membership meetings recently, and I mentioned this bill, and he's like, yeah, let's get it going. He's down to support us. And so it's really cool to have that inroad there and to make those types of connections with people in power who want to support and want to live with us. And he's also, so he represents parts of San Antonio down to Uvalde. And so in that sort of like south region of Texas, there are a lot of Indigenous communities there. And so a lot of this too is about finding who you can get on your side, not only because they believe in you, or because they believe in your issues, but because it affects their exact constituency. All right, lots of other links and resources. We have, as a caucus, our next general membership meeting is coming up on April 21st. These are always on Zoom, because we're scattered across the state. I live in Austin. A lot of people are here in W, or about Longview, Houston. So you can join us on Zoom every month. And links to more resources, the things I mentioned. And that's about all I have. So any questions? Okay. What kind of offers do you make? there's so many progressives there, so it's like, I don't know, so much competition, you know. But I think I need to do that.
I have to point you to these resources, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Is anyone here thinking about maybe running for office at some point, or know someone who might?
I was just talking to somebody about it actually. It's so
Yeah.
weird. This morning before
Oh, wow.
you came in here. Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about change and how to be more vocal and be heard. And I was like, have you considered? And she asked me the same thing. And we're like,
Consider this.
yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank y'all so much. Actually, real quick before I leave, there are some elections coming up, if you weren't aware. So May 4th, it's a lot of kind of small random things across the state. So I would just look, depending on where you live, there might be like a school board or city council race. May 28th is the primary runoff election. So in Dallas, I know there's the runoff for the sheriff, the county sheriff within the Democratic Party. There might be other things. And then November 5th, we have the general election. So president, U.S. Senate, Attorney Ted Cruz against Allred, and probably more. So don't forget about that. I'll leave those QR codes up. I also have our contact info, but then also just come find me. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And if you're not registered to vote, come find me. Oh, did you have a question? No. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you guys.
We were listening. Okay.